Good job today, man. One at a time, and we'll get the job done. Y'all know what to say. On three. 1, 2, 3.
And the home of the Jets.
What is going on, everybody? Happy Cinco de Mayo. One of these people on screen may or may not have had a couple cocktails. I don't think it was you. It was Joe Blewett. What's up, man?
Yeah, again, real story or fake story. The fake story is, I went out to dinner. The real story is I'm a dad. I'm exhausted, and I literally just woke up before this, so I almost missed it. But I'm glad to be here, Tyson. I wish I could have joined you in some festivities today.
You know, I was on my best behavior, dude. I had to be. I was like, you know what? We got a big exclusive interview here with a draft guru who's going to flex a little bit after his preview. So got to enjoy that. But first of all, thank you for enjoying. I appreciate your time, man, because you work a lot. Plus, you have JetsXFactor, which is doing great things. Plus, you're acting with the Jet stuff, man. So I appreciate your time. Your work ethic is relentless, man.
Yeah, no, I know you're on a similar plane. I've seen your workout videos and all that stuff, rise and grind, kind of makes me feel like shit. I'm sitting there eating a donut and I see you on the boardwalk running 8-10 miles. So I don't appreciate that, but nonetheless.
So the draft has come and gone, and it's really interesting to see the results and see where everybody ranked people and how they evaluate them. Yeah. But the minute JC Latham went, I immediately thought of you, because the really cool thing about this is that, like, when the draft comes and goes, like, I don't study players like you do. So I don't offer all the hot takes and go on social media like, this guy's the best guy, this guy. But you as an analyst, you do that and you put your name behind things. And you get a lot of criticism, whether it's good or bad. Like, hey, man, I watch 5 minutes of YouTube. I know more than you do. And you got to go back and deal with that. And then so it gets difficult. Like, I see what happens on social media with you. But when JC Latham was picked, I was like, I just thought of you immediately. I'm like, well, he's got that one.
One of the funny thing too is I got wind that he was going to go potentially one the night before the draft. And I was telling my wife, like, I am going to Vince Carter level dunk if he's the first guy off the board. Like, I was really, really excited. So him going too is a little bit lukewarm for me, but I still think it was somewhat of a victory for the brand. But yeah, man, it is what it is. Again, you have to like fight back against popular, media narratives, because everybody kind of rolls with the same opinion. So when you have one or two big guys who say they don't like JC Latham, everybody else is kind of stray away from the pack, because I think to do that, you kind of need to have some like firm stances in your opinion to be able to explain yourself. And typically people can't explain themselves, so they go with the tide. It just is what it is. I think that's the truth. So yeah, he was my guy. He was number one on my board. So for him to go two, again, I think it's a victory. Just when, some people were talking about him late first, early round two, I thought that was just absolute madness. And I think if you were ranking him there, again, it was probably built off the Michigan game, which again was a game with one bad play, not with many. And people said it was a bad game for him, but that's just, again, inherently not true. So,
and that's why I have so much respect for you, man. Because if I say, hey, man, I'm questioning your take, like, well, this is why, and you give a litany of reasons, not like, hey, it's this, the physical, like the play, and you give plays to back it up too. Like you said, it's a series of plays. It's not just, hey, I looked at the one YouTube highlight, I saw that one play, he got beat. No, here's other things he did good. Now, when as the board played out and the Jets are sitting there at 10, at 9, I was shocked the Bears took Odunze there. I was like, they're going to go defense. Odunze's going to fall to the Jets at 10. They're going to hit a home run. What were you thinking at 9? Were you thinking that was going to happen as well, or were you thinking they're taking a wide receiver?
Yeah, it's it was like I was hoping for the defender, but the Jets fan in me was like, okay, well, the first 8 picks went pretty much as bad as it can possibly go for the Jets. So the 9th pick is also going to go as bad as it possibly can for the Jets. Like at the end of the day, I wanted one of the big 3 receivers, and then past that, Alt and Latham were my 1 and 2. Obviously, Latham being 1 and Alt being my 2. So all of those guys went before the Jets pick. So it did kind of go as the worst possible way. Now apparently the Jets were trying to trade up, but hey, like Atlanta had conviction in their quarterback. Again, the wrong decision in my mind, but
Yeah.
They still had conviction, so they stayed there. And then obviously the Bears, it's like a thing where people would say they didn't take a receiver or they shouldn't take a receiver. But at the end of the day, when you looked at the roster, Keenan Allen is 32, 33 years old. And if you're really trying to build around your quarterback in the best way possible, give him another receiver, stack that 11 personnel. So I thought it might happen, but I was hoping for Dallas Turner or somebody like that. And then once they went on Dunze, like I had a pit in my stomach. I'm like, oh God, here comes Bowers. Like here it comes. Like, again, I like the player and all that, but I just didn't want to deal with the discourse, the madness, like you kind of alluded to on Twitter. Even though I did like the player, again, the discourse around him was brutal. So at that point, trading back, like Salah said in the Jets documentary, free money, getting that 4th and a 5th round pick to take an Olu. I was pretty happy. Again, like it was kind of at that breaking point of the draft where if those top 5 guys weren't there, being the 2 top offensive tackles and the 3 receivers, I wanted them to move back. Now they only moved back, 1 spot, and seemingly that was because the Jets had Fashanu, and I know it's Fashanu. I know it's technically Fashanu. You have to give me a few months. It's just I'm not
dude.
I'm not going to get it. It's going to be a few months. So Fashanu was apparently quite a bit above Fatanu and Fuaga for them. So at least they had conviction in their guy. They liked him, and they nabbed him there. And it's great for the Jets' depth. It raises the floor of the team. My question was after they drafted him. I'm sure we can get into the player individually, but my question was, okay, well, what about receiver? Like, how do they pivot? A lot of people freaked out, acted like the draft ended at that very moment. Again, there was that pit in my stomach. Like, okay, what do they do to pivot? If they pivot and they get a guy or two, then okay, I'm fine with it. If they don't, then the draft is going a little bit downhill for me. And obviously, they pivoted.
And that was my initial reaction too. Is like I understood it. I understood the pick. It was a sound pick, a quality pick. It addressed a need for the short term and the long term. And to be honest, I didn't panic at all. I saw the reactions. I'm like, it's 1 round. There's a lot of other moves left to be made. I wanted Joe Douglas to be aggressive, but in terms of the player itself, like. Do you think how far away do you think he is to be like a comparable starter right now? It's like learning from Tyron Smith is great. No pressure to play week 1 as of today is great. But is he far off? And then there was rumors that they may have him at left and right tackle, try to do both, which already annoys me. Like I don't want to play him at right, like play him at left and get good there and like be a master of one place and then worry about that. But where is he at in terms of a star right now, like as he currently exists?
Yeah, I think he's ready in pass protection. I do think he's the best pass protection guy in the draft. Like individually, just his pass sets, he is the best in the draft to me. So I think he's ready from that aspect. And in the run game, it's just like technique wise, you could see that his build and he has the strength to be an effective guy in the run game. And the one benefit of him, and I think I don't know if we spoke about this before the draft, but the Jets and them transitioning into more of like a power counter gap scheme is actually good for a guy like Fashanu. So I think being in this scheme versus like a Niners scheme where it's going to be mostly outside zone is actually going to help him because I don't like him isolated on zone blocks, whereas with like power and counter, you're working more double teams to the second level, things like that, better in terms of like angles. So it's going to be advantageous for him to be into this scheme. With that being said, he does have a little bit to go in the run game. Like, he gets on his toes a little bit too much. He'll be a little bit high. He needs to attack the center of gravity. Like there's a lot of little technical things he needs to do in the run game. But in terms of his pass sets, he's good. He's got quick feet. He's got good length. He's got good strike timing. He needs to change up his sets a little bit. He did indicate, I think he actually said it in his interview that he needs to work on getting his hands a little bit tighter and not getting his chest exposed. That was one of my concerns with him. And then, coming out of the draft was he has a very he has the same pass set pretty frequently, and you have the same pass set pretty frequently. Guys can obviously time it, just like a boxer or anything like that, like trying to relate it to you. It's like, hey, you have the same punch all the time. They're going to figure out how to counter it. 100%. And guys would kind of, they would flash up the arc a little bit to him. And then he would open up, kind of go wide hands, and guys, if they transitioned while he was opening up and just take his chest, he was done. Because once you get, you give up that chest control, you're screwed for the most part, unless you're like Tyron Smith, who jumps on you quick and he affords himself so much room to absorb the bull rush. But story for a different day. Fashanu is not Tyron Smith right now, so he has to work a little bit at that. But I think he's pro ready in terms of the pass game. If he was to come in right now, I would be pretty confident in him being at least average to above average pass setter. In the run game, if he struggles, it is what it is. It's like Brees. Look what Brees has been running behind the last couple of years. Now, ideally, yeah, we want him to be a stud in the run game. But if we have one guy who's below average in the run game in his first year and he comes in for 5, 6, 7 games, then like, okay, it is what it is. But and then in terms of moving him around, it's like, and I don't know. I'm gonna take it a step further, Tyson. I don't know where this came from, but people are like, oh well, Could he get cross-trained in guard? It's like, what are we doing here?
No,
like, can we stop with moving these guys around? You know, this kid who's
learn
21.
ABT?
Exactly. So this guy who's 21 years old is now playing left tackle, right tackle, and left guard in his first season. Like, what are we doing? So even left tackle to right tackle, like, okay, if they want us to cross-train, get a little bit of work at right tackle, just get a feel for it. In the absolute worst case scenario, okay, I get it. But I'm like you, I'd rather just have them just hunker down at left tackle, be a left tackle. And if you have to get a right tackle in free agency, again, you know, the season's not over today. It's not, you know, it's not May 5th is the deadline to add players. Like, if there's a right tackle out there, if a Donovan Smith can play right tackle, if like Andreas Peak could play right tackle, then go and grab one of those guys for $1.5 million, $2 million instead of making Fashanu move all around. Like, I rather have him just learn his spot. He's 21 years old. Just be a left tackle.
Yeah, be a master of one spot. Like how they treated AVT, like, oh, we learned our lesson. One spot for him, do that with him. Like, there's no, like, let's not get too cute with that. Now, how do you look at the Jets offensive line as a whole? Because a lot of moving parts, a lot of new pieces, but if healthy, which the big caveat with all of this is that it could be, I think, an above average line. My X factor is Keith Carter, it's Hackett, it's everything else, making adjustments. But in terms of talent and who they have there, what's your level of confidence in the offensive line if they were healthy?
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to say top 10, right? Like, if you look at it collectively, I know people can point out like, okay, well, you know, like John Simpson's one of their starters, but listen, like John Simpson, to me, watching him, he's like an average level guard, maybe a little bit below average. You can argue a little bit above average, again, you know, however you personally see it, but I think he's about an average guard. And if your average left guard is your worst player in your line, like, go around other teams in the NFL. Like, that's a hell of a weak link. So, you know, in terms of health, you know, and obviously that's a big caveat, right? Is the health, but Tyron Smith is still a top 3 left tackle in the league when he's healthy. You know, okay, want to argue top 5, top 7 minimum. Right. Morgan Moses is a solid right tackle. You know, maybe not top 5 or anything like that, but he's upper half of the league undoubtedly. He was really, and I actually think he got better going to the Ravens. I was more impressed with him watching his Ravens stuff than I was watching his Redskins stuff. I don't know if he's the Commanders at that point. I think they're actually still the Redskins before he came to the Jets. AVT is an all-pro level right guard. Now we have to obviously, you know, maybe give a little bit of wiggle room to putting him on that pedestal, because listen, like, he tore his Achilles. So maybe he's not all pro. Maybe he's just plus average, you know, this year, which is still great. And then Tittman was, you know what, I think he did he win some award for offensive lineman last year? I don't know what it was, but he was definitely better than JMS, and he was the best center in the draft, at least in year 1. So you're going to assume that he's plus average as well. So I think you know, considering health, this should be a top 10 line. Morgan Moses, and I'm going to knock on wood here because I'm a Jets fan, but he's been relatively healthy his entire career. You know, he got hurt last year for a few games, but you do, again, want to have a little bit more wiggle room because he's 33, 34 years old. So you want to have a good contingency plan, but you're hoping that, you know, kind of like his career norm, he's going to be healthy next year. So yeah, I think it should be a top 10 line. And now you have, you know, Tyron Smith, who's going to miss 4, 5, 6 games, and you have hopefully a stud left tackle who's going to come in and replace him. So I think the line should be pretty damn good. Now, again, I'm a little bit concerned with Keith Carter and Hackett and all that stuff, but individual talent level, it's a damn good line.
No, I agree, man. It's like, it's just a big if they could all stay healthy. That's the whole thing. And it's like, I'm not saying 17 games, give me 13 or 14 of those games, and you can find a way with Aaron Rodgers to win those games, and they'll be fine. So first round comes and goes. I was satisfied. The overreactions on social media I thought were complete bullshit. Like, it's one pick, man. Like, we got to let it all play out. But I will say this. I did start getting nervous in the second round, because I'm like, all right, Joe Douglas, you've got to move up and get a guy, because there's going to be a run on wide receivers, which there was. And then you're like, all right, and they're not doing it. Now it's like, end the second round, you're like, dude, what are you doing? We cannot keep waiting. Be aggressive and do something, right? So they make a move. And what do you think about Corley? Because it's like they go there, and it was like, you know, some people were celebrating, some people like, oh, it's a reach, they should have this. And then it was like, oh, he's just a gadget guy. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go based on what I see. I'm going to wait for your review, because you're going to keep it real. But like, well, he's not just this, he's not just that. So give us your breakdown. First of all, on the pick, you like the style is like aggressive to move up, and then the player.
I was gonna mention with Fashanu, I forgot, just going over the talking points in my head, but you weren't one of those guys on Twitter who was putting up low light highlights of our first round pick who's 21 years old. That wasn't you, Tyson? No retweets there. Okay, just making sure. Yeah, that's kind of embarrassing. But so for Corley, again, it was one of those things where, again, how do you pivot after that first round? Is it with a receiver in the second round and signing a Boyd? Like, what are they exactly going to do? And obviously we still have time to talk about, free agent wide receivers and exactly how they should wrap up that group. But yeah, I wanted the receiver. Obviously, like you said, a lot of them started going in the beginning of the second round. And it's like, hey, listen, at the end of the day, like we talked about before the draft even happened, like at a certain point, it's quality versus quantity type of deal. And we need quality at this point in terms of the roster. So I was sitting there getting a little bit nervous too, seeing some of the bodies fly off the board. And then obviously the Jets move up 10 picks from 72 to 63, I think it was. So it was 9 picks or whatever it was. And they grabbed Corley. Corley is legitimately probably the most interesting player I've ever studied. In terms of there's a very large variability of how he works out. So for me, he's a guy, I like his mindset a lot. The yak is obviously great. Again, and people hold on to your panties here, but with Corley, I think the yak might be a slightly overrated with him. I think he's very good at yak. There is times where you love the mindset that he has, lowering his shoulder and trying to truck over people. But there is times in space where he could pick a better lane instead of just trying to truck a guy over and maybe make a little bit more space for himself. So to me, it's an elite mindset with really good skills, where I wish that it was followed with the elite mindset was followed also with great vision and stuff like that. So I do think the yak is very, very good. Do I think he's Debo right off the jump? No, there's one of one with Debo, right? So he's not going to be that. I still think he's going to be a very, very good yak guy. So I was slightly disappointed there. Now, with that being said, I was also much more high on him in terms of his vertical route running. So you go into the draft and you hear that he can't run routes and all this stuff, and short to intermediate, there's not a lot there. His work against press needs a lot of work. His finding soft spots and zones needs a lot of work. There's just really simple things him drifting over the middle right into a linebacker zone instead of kind of being a little bit more strict, sitting it down, creating a better throwing lane for his quarterback. So there's definitely some areas that Rodgers is going to get frustrated with him in terms of in terms of his route running that he needs to definitely work on. His hands are super inconsistent. There's one, he'll snag one ball to the air that's outside of his frame that he'll make a leaping jump for, and then there's a ball that's over the middle that he doesn't look in because he's looking to get some extra yak, and he just drops an easy ball. So very volatile in his short intermediate game and his ball skills. There's times where he tracks the ball really, really well, and there's a time where he doesn't track the ball well and he completely misjudges the ball. So he's very volatile in his play. But with his vertical route running, again, I do think that there's a vertical element to his game. There's some contested catches to his game. There's ability there. There's some wasted movement in terms of his route running. He still has he has to get a general feel for space. There's some times where he kind of doesn't understand his stem, and he actually stems a guy kind of where he doesn't want a guy to be, and he ends up running into a guy. Doesn't really sound overly technical, but it kind of is in terms of getting into the film and just talking about the stems and how to exactly set guys up for vertical route running. And he doesn't necessarily completely understand it. There is some wasted footwork, slowing himself down too much. But overall, there's definitely an ability there that I did not expect. So I would say, yeah, again, a little bit down on his yak as compared to other people. I still think it's good. Just maybe I still think it's great. Let's say not elite. And there is another element to his game in terms of the vertical route running, dyno stems, pressure steps, rocker steps, all the stuff that I talk about on my channel that he does have. But overall, the rest of his game is really, really raw. So initially, I see him as a guy who's going to be that yak guy at first, obviously, right? I'm not breaking ground there. I think he's going to be primarily a yak guy. And then if you look at his spray chart in terms of his route running, it was 3 routes that he ran, or there's 3 general routes that he ran that are really kind of conducive to success with the Jets, because it's a lot of what Rodgers throws. A lot of what he went on were overs, crossers, which Rodgers will throw plenty, vertical routes, which Rodgers throws plenty, and then yak stuff, quick to the flat. So that's exactly what he did at Western Kentucky, and that's exactly what he'll do here at first. Now, I do think there's going to be some growing pains with him. He's going to have to develop. He's definitely raw, and Saleh came out and said it right away. He's usually not so upfront with players, but he came out and said, hey, he's really raw as a route runner. So with a guy like Corley, defensively, I do think he's a guy who, again, he's going to be a little bit of a slow burn for people, minus the yak stuff right off the jump. So I still do think it's important to add another receiver, just because I don't expect him to hit the ground running like some other prospects would, just because, again, he's very raw, elite mindset. But Western Kentucky did not ask him to do a lot. There's not a lot of press reps I saw. There's not a lot of like NFL route running in terms of like having to run a 15-yard out, a 15-yard dig. You didn't really see it. You didn't really see him work against press. You didn't see him, like adjusting his routes, side adjust, like things you have to do at the NFL level. So it was a very like gimmicky offense where he was working in space. So there's quite a bit of development with him. There's a very high ceiling, a very low floor with a lot of his game. Again, one of the most interesting players I've ever studied.
Yeah, and the thing, I guess I have two things with that. It's he's definitely a project, I think, but it's like the hype around him. I think with the fans, the expectations, like Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, all these things. I'm like, oh, he's a great talent. He's great this, great that. It's like it's gonna take time, and like even like sometimes I think the Jets, they're their own biggest enemy by setting expectations too high for their player as well. He's like, you need talent. It's like you gotta just keep it real. Like, all right, he's a good player with a lot of potential, but let's temper expectations a little bit. But the question I have for you is, we don't like Hackett's offense last year was a joke. We didn't know what the fuck it really was, to be honest, but he was a mess. Yeah. But his scheme and the precision of Aaron Rodgers with the route running and the passing, all that, is that a concern for you early on where this kid could get discouraged, or Rodgers could, like, even Randall Cobb said it last year, he's got to trust you. The ball isn't coming to you. Is it going to be a concern early on where they may have to work him in slowly, keep it to the short, like the real short intermediate routes, ones he's really, really comfortable with, grow his route tree much later on in the season where he has that NFL confidence?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it is, right? Like, you don't, unless they're idiots and they're just going to put a square peg round hole type of deal. Like, he's going to be raw at first, so don't ask him to do a lot. Like, ask him to do exactly what he should be doing. Ask him to be a yak guy. Like, you don't have to force him into doing something that he doesn't need to do. And like I said, he's a guy who's going to be a slow burn. So if they try to put too much on his plate at first, then that's their fault. Like, coming from Western Kentucky, again, let him flourish where he's supposed to flourish, and then slowly build up his confidence, slowly build up his role in the offense. Exactly. And again, it might be a thing where the first couple of weeks he's getting 2-3 screen passes a game, end arounds, jet sweeps, whatever. And then you start seeing 4, 5, 6 targets, 100%. And then 7, and then 8. And then when Garrett gets doubled, now he's a vertical threat. Now he's learning how to run routes over the middle. Now he's learning how to run, again, a lot of his offense, and a lot of people online, which I'm not going to get into, because again, you know what Twitter is. I'm not going to argue with people. I just don't have the time to argue with people. It's like, oh, all of his cuts are rounded. It's like, yeah, well, Western Kentucky asked him to run a bunch of speed cuts, which is speed cuts you're not going to break down. You're not going to take what I call like stop steps and really gear down. You're running all of your breaks without actually breaking down. So they're all going to be rounded, right? Like, if you break down 2 steps and then your third step of your route is you breaking, okay, it's obviously going to be a sharper break than you just breaking off your right foot and going inside without slowing your body down. So, obviously the slower you go, the easier it is to have more, angular route running. But with Western Kentucky, they didn't ask him to do that. So it's not a thing that, again, and this is why he's interesting, it's not a thing that he can't do, because his body and his frame definitely allow him to turn tight corners, but it's not a thing he was asked to do. Right. So there's a lot of gray area in his game in terms of, like, I don't know exactly what he's going to be. And that's why he's so interesting, because there was things that I just legitimately didn't see on film because Western Kentucky didn't ask him to do it. Now I'm assuming that just because he hasn't done it, that he's going to be raw at the NFL level. Rodgers does need to trust his guys. But I think Rodgers is smart enough to realize, and especially if this guy is going to sleep in his pool house, which, by the way, horrible teammate, right? All these people, horrible teammate. He hates everybody, but he's a rookie 21-year-old kid, staying in his guest house. But nonetheless, I think Rodgers is smart enough to realize what he is and not asking him to do too much. It's not like, this is 2019 or 13, 14, 17, whatever the terrible years of the Jets were, most of them, where we draft the guy in the 3rd round, like, oh my God, he's receiver 1. He's gonna beat out David Nelson for receiver 1 on the depth chart. It's like, so he's actually, instead of coming in with a whole bunch of expectations, he's a guy who could easily be, the 5th or 6th guy in terms of targets in the offense. And again, once he develops, then he gets some more targets. But it is a thing where he's going to have some ups and downs, undoubtedly, I believe, in his rookie year, maybe even his second year. But he has all the physical capability to be a very good receiver. Again, 4.45 speed. It doesn't really sound so fast, but he does a good job with like route pacing and stuff. In terms of like vertical routes, he already has that to his game, which is just in terms of like showing a guy 80% speed. You get to the break point, and then you start running 100, and you trip trip guys up a little bit in terms of the route pacing. So he does some things like that. Double moves again are pretty good. He has like that stop and go that he does. It's really good. So again, super, super, super interesting player. I like the prospect, but I don't think people understand necessarily what he is again. And it's kind of why I like to keep my mind fresh before going to these reviews, because you draft him and I'm just like everybody else. I turn on YouTube highlights. Like, I don't know who the guy is really, because I don't watch guys past the first round. Again, I'll admit that before the draft, I don't like to just talk about guys who don't know anything about. So I watch him and then you hear, okay, yak. That's all he is. That's all he is. I'm like, okay, well, what about like these, I don't know how many plays I put up on Twitter, 10 to 15 vertical plays. I'm like, this is pretty freaking good from him too. So again, it's not a thing where like he's not Jalen Waddle, at first with a deep ball, but he definitely has capability there. So I think he's going to be a yak guy, a deep ball guy, post double moves, just straight 9 routes. And then you're going to run him on some overs, on some drag, and just give him the ball in space. And then in terms of, again, square cuts, digs, deep outs, things like that, those are things they'll slowly develop in his game.
Yeah, and this is a great point by Kev too. It's like the expectations are over the top, starting with JD and Salah's text during the draft. And that's true. The Jets, it's like, listen, we all want to be excited about players, but don't make it to the point where everybody has these ridiculous expectations. And to the one point you made too, it's like the one thing I hate about the Jets, it's like you made a perfect point. Like, let him run the routes he's comfortable with early on and grow it. The last thing I want to hear from Salah is he doesn't know the full route tree. We can't play him. No. You can get him on the field, but have that a limited role was fine. Let him slowly learn and progress, and then get him in a mix and let your offense explode. Now, the question I had with that, I was hoping the Jets drafted a second receiver. I really did. I was hoping I want more. We talked about this before, but I want a lot of weapons, a lot of proven weapons. And now it's like I walk away, I'm like, all right, I get it. But the wide receiver group still concerns me a little bit. And I respect what Aaron Rodgers brings to the table, everybody being better with him there. But Mike Williams is still kind of an unknown. We know who he is, but when is he coming back, and what is he going to be when he comes back? I'd like a veteran. What are your thoughts on the Jets' overall wide receiver room? Are you comfortable? Because I'm still like that cynical, angry Jet fan where like one Garrett Wilson injury away from being in deep shit, right? Like that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, that's terrible to even say. I hope that does not happen. But it's like you said, Mike Williams. When does he come back? What is he when he comes back? He can he could have a setback in camp again. Hopefully it doesn't happen. But setback, and then he's coming back October 28th. And we're waiting there for the first couple of weeks and playing games versus the Niners or whoever it may be. We're really going to need some guys. So yeah, I'm with you. Like looking at it again, Mike Williams is a question mark. Again, Corley I think is a pretty raw player. It's going to take a little bit to hit the ground running. So let's say let's say even it's not Mike. Let's say it's not even Garrett Wilson. It's Mike Williams. Garrett Wilson, Corley, who's pretty raw, and Allen Lazard is your 1, 2, 3. If Mike Williams is there, like, could he survive with that? Sure. And I get the thinking that Rodgers, he made Lazard what he is, and like he can make a bad receiver look decent. Well, then why not take a decent receiver and make him look great with Aaron Rodgers? Like I don't understand. Like because we have Aaron Rodgers, that just means we can just surround him with shit prospects and make them better. It's like no, we're going for a Super Bowl. Give me a guy for $3 million who's going to be decent, Yep. So I think I would definitely like a receiver. Now it depends on who we're talking about. Boyd, I would like Boyd. The problem with Boyd is you're going to play Corley mostly in the slot. Garrett Wilson plays mostly in the slot as well. Both of those guys are going to be hopefully like 50-50 there. I would say probably Corley a little bit at first, a little bit more than Garrett Wilson. But both of those guys should primarily be, or more so be in the slot. So then where does Boyd fit? Can Boyd play outside? Is he able to, or is he just a slot guy? Because he is a slot guy in Cincy, but was he not necessarily not miscast there, but was he not used to his full advantages? I don't know necessarily. So he doesn't seem like the best fit. I would love Corey Davis back. Unfortunately, it seems like he doesn't want to come back to the Jets, so maybe that one doesn't happen. Obviously, Odell signed. Odell, I get, I still think he's a decent receiver 3. I don't want to add the volatility to the locker room, so I'm kind of glad he signed elsewhere. I think DJ Shark signed, so I think what's left is basically Boyd, Davis, Zay Jones is out there, MVS is out there, Hunter, the thing with Hunter Renfrow is again, that's an interesting study because he's a guy who he was great and he fell off the face of a cliff. And we don't necessarily know why. Was it injury? It seemed to be injuries, but what does he have left? I know a lot of people, I think I've seen you on Twitter dumping on MVS a little bit, which is completely fine because I get it. But my thing is right now, gun to your head, Tyson, you have Jason Brownlee running a 9 route versus MVS. Who are you taking? Like, I know we don't want MVS, but he's at least had 500-600 yards in the NFL, right? 400, 500, 600 yards. I know last year it wasn't a lot with the Chiefs, but he's had success with Rodgers. We are missing, in my opinion, a true like vertical threat to the offense. I know I said Corley could be that, but he's not that exactly right now. So adding an MVS as your 4 or 5 to complete with Lazard is at least like a nice safe move. I think a Davis or a Boyd like really raises the ceiling of the group, whereas those guys just round out kind of for the floor of the group. But I would like to add somebody because, again, people get obsessed with the players on the Jets and everybody's so great. And it was always like that too. Like that's, you know what it is. Again, you've been podcasting forever. It's like, we're 2-14, but everybody on the Jets is somehow great. It's like, well, somebody has to suck. Like somebody sucks here. So, last year it was Gibson and Brownlee. Like Gibson, I think he fumbled the ball like 5 times last year. It could have been 4, but I believe it was 5 times. He fumbled. Jason Brownlee had that one highlight in training camp. But again, I'll be brutally honest. I always am. Like his preseason tape was god awful. Like it was he was really bad in the preseason, and like people were hyping him up. I watched him like, dude, this is not great, So I know he had that one touchdown later or whatever, but Jason Brownlee and Gibson are kind of like, we know who they are because we're Jets fans. Nobody else knows who they are because they're just Jags at this point. Now, I do want to preface this by saying people get mad at you like, oh, you don't know what they're going to be. Like you can't say that. Right. Okay, I get it. Like they could be good players. I'm not saying they are good players. It's like when I watched I'm sure we'll talk about the defensive line, but like one of the things I talked about was like, okay, I liked Woods last year over Fotu this year. People are like, you can't say that. You got to watch the season play out. I'm like, okay, let me rephrase for everybody. I'll say it very slowly. At the time of the signing, I liked Woods more than I liked Fotu at the time of the signing.
Exactly.
Again, the time of the signing. So like people get so mad at me, but it's like, I'm watching what I can, and I don't like the player as much. Like I'm not going to lie to you guys. So, in terms of, I guess I go transition back to the receivers. I always kind of lose my train of thought. Maybe it's from doing so many solo podcasts, but it's with the receiver core. Yeah, I would definitely like to add somebody. Again, MVS is a floor raiser. But I think like a Boyd or Davis, if you could take that $7 million-ish save with JFM and parlay that into a receiver. Again, I'm never going to love what happened on the defensive line, which we can talk about later. But if you parlay that into again a Tyler Boyd, then okay, we're good. But I think you could get by with this receiver group. So maybe it's more of a want than a need, but I want it. Like give it to me. So give me another receiver.
But then that's the whole thing. It's like we're being greedy. It's a win now year. I want as many weapons as humanly possible, as many upgrades as humanly possible. And I'm getting people attack me over my MVS takes, and it's funny as hell. I'm like, first of all, I'm just a fan. I know he drops a lot of passes. That's all I know because I had him on fantasy teams. I watched the games, and those drops, like to me, it's like Lazard with his nonsense. MVS, like having those two gives me like, oh my god, I can just feel like. But he is an upgrade. You're right. He is an upgrade, and I wouldn't be mad at it. And it's like a relationship. If Rodgers likes him and a relationship with him, hey, the more the merrier. But like it's fine. It's just you just know, man. It's just like you could. But
now this is like a terrible comparison or like a way to think about it. But like, would you ever draft Jason Brownlee on your fantasy team? Like at least MVS is rosterable on some fantasy teams. Like it might be a 16-team league or whatever you're in there, but nonetheless, like at least he's somebody. He's not the perfect name. No, he's not. He's not Boyd. No, he's not Davis. He's not Odell. But again, right now, gun to my head, MVS versus Jason Brownlee or Gibson. I'm taking MVS. So I'll take the move now. If they go out there and they overpay him like they did Kinlaw and they pay him $7 million, and I'm going to lose my shit. But if it's a $2 million contract, then it's completely fine. So I think they do need to add something. It's just about what level of player do they feel that they have to bring in. If I had to bet, it's probably MVS just because he has a familiarity. So I think that'll probably happen to the receiver group. And again, it's like you said, it's technically more of a want, but why not just load up for a Super Bowl this year? Again, $2 million. If you can't figure out how to adjust $2 million in your cap next 2 years, you can't afford it this year. Then like, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah, and the thing is too is like now that we're down to we only have 2 or 3 guys available. And he's there. It's like, all right, I'll take him. It's like I've been saying this for a month now. But this is when other guys are still available too. It's like I'd rather have him. It's like cross him off the list. He's gone.
It's like your options at the bar, Tyson. It's like you have your first people you want, and then they start dwindling down. They got boyfriends walking in. It's like that 5 turned into an 8 real quick.
Well, I was at the Stone Pony last night, and they sold out like some different beers. So you start with the beer you like. You have your Blue Moons, this, that, and then you're down to like Asbury Park Blondale. I'm like, well, all right, let's go with that one because there's nothing else left. No, it's MVS is fine. And again, you want that vertical guy, you want a deep guy, you want proven route runners that Aaron Rodgers trusts. I wouldn't hate it. It's just, it is what it is. Now, you go through the draft here, and we went into the draft saying, you know what, you want wide receiver, you want offensive line, you want a quarterback, you probably want a running back too. I kind of want to go to veteran running back route, but I'm like, it wouldn't surprise me. So they go out and get a running back, and is like the world went on fire. Like, holy cow, this kid's a beast. He's like, but he's a really good fit though, because the Jets need this kind of running back. They haven't this kind of running back in a while. They tried fullbacks, they tried tight ends, but they need that masher. He's kind of the opposite of Breece Hall, where he can just bulldoze, short yardage, goal line, also end the games, run out the clock, and just steal the wool, the defense. What are your thoughts on him, man? Do you like the pick? Do you like the value of the pick?
Yeah, I like him there. Joe Douglas has drafted a running back in every single draft. He's been in a part of the Jets, so you should have expected a running back, especially considering the Jets have Breece, and then again behind him he's a complete question mark. So your 2, 3, 4 are complete question marks there. So I expected somebody in the draft. I watched I think I have 3 games left. I watched his entire 2022 tape, and now I'm all the way through 2023. So I've watched, 25 games of Allen. So I'm about to wrap up his review, but he's a little bit volatile too, in terms of like one really good play. You like the size. We'll start there. Like 6'1", 235, 240, 245. Like he's a brick shit house. Like you could obviously see that. Like the kid's squatting like 14,000 pounds. It's quite ridiculous. But yeah, he's a horse. He's a guy who, and I put this on Twitter quite a few times. It's like, again, and I think it's just people kind of flowing with the tide here. He doesn't have breakaway speed. I think that's complete horseshit. I do. A guy who's 235. He's not Chris Johnson. Like no crap. He's not Chris Johnson. He's not 200 pounds. Like he's 235. So it's all relative to their frame. And he moves well for his frame. He's more of like a straight line mover. You could almost see like his movements in the backfield, because he's a little bit more tight. Like his moves are almost more like segmented, like left and then straight, instead of like just like one smooth kind of motion. So he's definitely a little bit stiff. He doesn't have the best lateral movement. He doesn't have the best change of direction, but he has good acceleration. He's big. When he gets moving, he's hard to stop. He bounces off of guys at the second level. His legs don't stop churning. There's some things he needs to work on. He runs a little bit upright for my liking. There are some times where, and Breece has this a little bit too, and this is somewhere Breece actually struggled in his rookie year, and then Saleh actually called it out in the media, which was not something I enjoyed seeing, but it was something I was saying for the first couple of weeks of Breece's career. I'm like, hey, he's bouncing it too much, bouncing. And then Saleh came out, I think it was like week 5 or 6. He's like, yeah, Breece has to start taking up the field more. I was like, yes, that's what we've been saying. So he and Allen has a little bit to that game, a little bit of that in his game as well, where like whatever the play may be, he tries to get a little bit extra, bounce it outside instead of just taking like 3 yards. So like you'll have a run that, hey, this is only going to get 3 or 4 yards. It didn't work up, scheme, whatever it may be. Like some reps you just lose just based on the call. And there's times where, hey, just take that 3 yards, just take that 4 yards. Instead, he bounces it, negative gain or stuff the line of 1 yard or 1 yard instead of getting 4 or 5 yards. So there are some times I want him to just lower his shoulder and just get the available yards. There's little technical things I want him to work on in terms of like his footwork, shortening his stride a little bit. He's not the most creative guy like in the backfield. If there's quick penetration, guy meets him right in the A gap, like he's not going to be able to make him miss. He does, he doesn't have the best creativity, but again, I think his acceleration is underrated. I think his overall athleticism in terms of like straight line explosive movement is underrated. Very powerful guy, but there's a lot of technical work he needs with, again, like guiding his blockers and setting up gaps. He was definitely better in 2022 than 2023 so far. The change in scheme hurt him a little bit in 23, which was true. In 22, there was more like pin and pulls, counters, powers, those type of runs, more angle blocking like the Jets are going to run. And in 23, from what I've watched so far, it's been a little bit more zone. He's not the best zone runner. The reads are more defined for you in power and stuff like that. So he's not the best back in terms of, again, vision. So when you define the reads from a little bit and just let him go, that's where he's better, and that's why he was better in 22. But yeah, I like him. A little bit more volatile than you'd like at times, but he's a guy who's going to get you like 1 yard, 1 yard, 1 yard 60. Like he's that type of running back. Now he's not like the classic home run threat. He's not Izzy. He's not a guy who has like a ton of speed, but there's home run threats kind of come in different shapes and sizes, right? Like Breece Hall is kind of a home run threat. Like Breece Hall is not a guy who's going to get you 5 yards, 5 yards, 5 yards, 40. Like he's a guy who will get you 1 yard, 1 yard, 1 yard, 40. Like he is a guy who tends to bounce a little bit. So Braelon Allen is kind of similar in terms of that aspect, while also being very different in terms of their frame and how they they run the ball. Brees has a little more speed and finesse. Braelon Allen has good speed, but is much more powerful, much more prone to bouncing off of guys, much more, strong when he lowers his shoulder, just absolutely demolishes guys. Pass pro, kind of the same thing. Very good in terms of like his aggression, his want to. I put up a few plays of him decleating people, like absolutely molly-whopping defensive ends and linebackers. And that happens when you're as strong as he is. There's some times where, whether it be him not understanding scheme or like almost like Becton to go for the kill shot instead of containing guys. There's some of that with Allen where he goes for the kill shot. The guy moves around him laterally, and because he puts so much into that punch, now he's not balanced when he misses, type of deal. Then he'll lose his guy a little bit, allow a sack. But overall, I would say his pass protection surprised me in terms of how good he is at it. There was more hiccups in 22. There hasn't really been a lot in 23. So I think his pass protection is actually pretty damn good. Now he has to learn NFL scheme and all that, but I like him there as well. So a little bit volatile in terms of division. Yeah, might fumble. He carries the ball a little bit loosely, but then he's have a play where you get pissed off at him for getting no gain, and then you're gonna have a play where he trucks 3 guys and gets 25 yards. Right. So he's a fun player to watch.
And that's the one thing too, is like you wonder, because like that's kind of why I wanted a veteran running back for pass protection. I'm like, you want to want to protect Aaron Rodgers, you want like late in the game, you want all these different things. And it's like, but it's like this is the way they're going to go. It's fine, but can he pick it up? How quickly will they trust him doing it? Different things like that. Because Izzy struggled with it. You have Brees, but they could put a tight end back, different things. But it's like I want to see what he is there. Did you take a lot of time to look at Jordan Travis yet or no? Because I think as a pick, a lot of people liked it was him versus Pratt. But did you have like early thoughts on him?
Yeah, so what I did after the draft was I like to have like a baseline of players because I'll come on shows like this and I don't want to talk out of my ass on a lot of these guys. So what I did was I watched like 4 or 5 games of every single prospect of minus Jalen Key. I'm still waiting for some Alabama film on their defense, but I watched 2 games of him. But everybody else, I watched 4 or 5 games, and then I went back to do Corley. I did all of Corley's again 2022 and 2023. I'm almost finished with Allen, and then I'll get back into Travis and all those guys. But yeah, I watched. I can actually pull it up of Travis. I watched Louisiana State, Southern Mississippi, Boston College, and his Clemson game. So I watched 4 of Travis, 6'1", 200 pounds. He's a little bit limited as a thrower. I do think his arm is just average, even slightly below average at times. Like he's a guy who he's very accurate, short, intermediate, and even deeper throws that are kind of contained to the box. He's pretty accurate. But you do see his lack of arm power at times. Like, and I think people, when they think of arm power, it's like automatic, like the Twitter highlights. It's like, oh, can he throw the ball 65 yards? Like a lot of guys can throw the ball 60, 65 yards when they crow hop into it. The real test of NFL like throw power and throw strength is like that 20-yard out opposite hash. Like that's what you're looking for. And sometimes with Travis, you can see him have to put a lot of his upper body into the throw. And then because he has to put a little bit more oomph into the throw, his technical aspect obviously dips a little bit. So you can see him spray a little bit once it's a harder NFL throw. And you see some technical aspects like when you rotate your upper half, like you really want to like follow like that arm to kind of take like a horizontal plane and stop there. And he tends to like kind of throw down and drop that elbow, and then makes his release point a little bit high. And again, it's just a little bit wild. So I want to see him fix his throwing motion a little bit in terms of throwing the ball with like a lot of drive on it. But so while he's more of like an average arm thrower, you could also make up for that in terms of like his athleticism, right? So like, yeah, a little bit negative in terms of the strength, but he also is a good athlete. He can get on the move, read option, power, whatever it may be. Like he's a threat there. So he makes up for a little bit with his legs, but competitor, definitely a playmaker, keeps his eyes down the field. Again, enough arm strength. I think it's a pretty quick delivery under pressure. Keeps his eyes down the field, accurate thrower on the move. So like there's definitely plenty of good there. Acceleration, speed, looseness in his hips, flexibility, all of that. Now, obviously he broke his, I don't know if it was his left ankle or right ankle or whatever exactly the injury was, but he broke something in his leg. So it's obviously a little bit of a concern, so you have the injury there. And then in terms of the mental stuff, I think that's where he needs a little bit of work. Like there's some times like pre-snap reads, I think he processes a little bit slow based on what I saw pre-snap. And then even post-snap reading, there's some inconsistencies. There's some times he'll hang on a read. There's some times he'll bounce between reads, which you don't necessarily want. There's some times where he's a little bit slow to process and get through reads. There's some times where he needs to see a guy open before he throws it. And, at the NFL level, typically, once you see it open, it's already going to be closed. So you got to anticipate it being being open. So with Travis, there is a little bit of that. Like, I need to see this guy open. So he's an interesting prospect, but I think he has, again, average arm plus athlete in terms of running the ball. So that averages him out to like a solid athlete, however we quantify that. But then past that, it's like, yeah, he struggles a little bit in terms of the mental, part of the game, but hey, good thing he's learning from Tyrod and Aaron Rodgers. Like, it's the best case scenario. So I was sitting there in the beginning of round 4 and they danced a little bit around those rounds, and we didn't love that. But I think at the beginning of round 4, I said this on somebody else's stream, but it's like at the beginning of that round, if I told you that 2 of those, actually even all 3 of those picks, 1 pick is going to become a 3rd next year. Okay. Probably sign up for that, even though we probably like it to be this year because we're going for it all. So I get the disagreement with that, but overall a 4th for a 3rd, good trade. Okay. And then if I said, hey, those other 2 4th round picks are going to be Jordan Travis and Braelon Allen, people are like, okay, like cool. We love those picks. Yep. So yes, did they dance around? Yes. Did I love that? I didn't, but the players I ended up with, we wanted anyway. So I'm not going to go crazy about it. And I think it's perfect for Travis in terms of developing him. Like I kind of talked about with receiver, if we drafted a 4th or 5th round rookie a couple of years ago, like we were depending on him maybe to start like that year, like 100%. Bryce Petty. It's like and then Bryce Petty came out and said he was literally learning coverages from Madden, which is just mind blowing. Because that's just, I don't know how that's possible. I really don't. I don't know how realistic Madden is. I haven't played it really, but nonetheless, yeah. So I think it's a perfect scenario from him. You're coming into a system where you have an elite number 1 quarterback, and then you have Tyrod, who is different. He's different than him. I don't want to say just because they both run, they're the same player. Tyrod has a better deep ball and things like that. But Tyrod is an elite veteran who is most likely going to be willing to mentor him. So he's coming into a really good scenario. He can learn for 2 or 3 years. You give him a shot in 2026, maybe, obviously there's a long way to go, right? Like, who gives a shit? Why am I even talking about this? But, in 2027, you bring in a vet to compete with him. If he balls out and he is our next, Jordan Love to the Packers, obviously a lesser of a pick in terms of the prospect level. But if he could be that, like, awesome. Like, yep. I think it's so worth it to develop him. Now you also had Radler, who people wanted, and there was Pratt ended up going the 7th round. And Radler was a guy who I preferred, again, with a super, super shallow opinion of them. So I transparently, I said that, and I said it before the draft. I'm like, I'm saying this, but don't put any stock in my opinion because I don't really have a real opinion. And you look at Radler and like, okay, maybe he has higher physical upside, but the big difference in the players is, and again, this is a little bit of speculation, and hopefully, Radler did change, but he seemed like, excuse my French here, but like a complete douche on that quarterback show that he was on. Yeah. So is he still that player? Whereas Travis, the first thing you hear about him, like how great of a dude he is. Coleman said he went to, he's the best. Obviously he's his teammate, but he's like the best quarterback in the draft. And there's people saying like they literally went to Florida State to play with Jordan Travis. So you have an elite guy in terms of the locker room, which is great because like. And Radler doesn't have a leg to stand on here, but like, who's to say in year 3 he's not like, I earned my role, like I'm not going to compete, like whatever it may be. Is he soft mentally? So I think adding a guy with an elite mental makeup in Jordan Travis is a great move, and then hopefully he develops into being a long-term starter for the Jets. But I love the move to develop a guy. If it was a 2nd round, 3rd round pick, I'd be kind of pissed, but I think he ended up being a 5th round pick for the Jets. I'll sign the dotted line any day. Yeah, no, and you're literally, we don't want to see him for 3 years. Like, you know what? Rodgers, Tyrod, learn, get better, be a great teammate, and do as much as that. Now, this is where, like, I like the draft to this point. Then later on, because I'm sitting here, I'm like, we need wide receiver. Yeah. I'm just focused on offense. Mm-hmm. You go for another running back, and I'm just like, what are we doing? Yeah. I understand, like, and this is no disrespect to the player. Mm-hmm. I'm just looking about what we actually need. And it's like, to me, you throw enough pieces in the room, one of them are going to stick out. If you have Brownlee, Gibson, and this player to be, other one, compete, let the best man play, but just keep filling that room up. Like we talked about earlier, they go running back. When I'm like, we just put one. You got Brees, you got Izzy. Is it really a need? It seemed like a similar player. Were you kind of shocked they went that route? I think I'm a little bit different with people in terms of this opinion. Like at the end of the day, so like, and this is how I phrased it to a couple of other people. Like, let's say we went to the draft with 3 running backs. Let's just say we lived in an alternate universe where we had, Michael Carter was still on the team, and we went to the draft with Brees Hall, Michael Carter, and Izzy. Like, if we drafted a guy in the 5th round as a running back, like, would you be concerned? Like, would you say anything? So like they need typically teams can carry 3 to 4. The Jets are going to be a team who probably carries 4 with the emphasis they're going to put on the power run game and all of that. So like it's a thing where they needed 2 running backs. So either they drafted a guy in the 5th round or they signed a guy for $1.5 million. So like for me, a 5th round pick's a 5th round pick. Like, yeah, would I prefer it to be a receiver? Sure. But like, what are the chances that receiver or that guard's going to work out? Like, let's say, okay, a lot of people like they wanted that guard, whoever that guard is, John Smith. They wanted John Smith in the 5th round. Yep. What is it? And we got to see how they pivot, right? Like it's Cinco de Mayo. We have plenty of time. Is John Smith, that guard from whoever, going to be better than, let's say, if we sign McGovern? You know, so like it's all about the pivot. So if they go and get a receiver, if they go and get a guard, then who gives a shit about the running back in the 5th round? And if he works out and he's a good player, then great. It's just to me, like the 5th round, it's such a low hit rate that if you have conviction in a player there, then take him. So like, yes, would I have preferred something else there? Sure. But it's not something that's going to severely impact my draft grade, because if he comes in and he's fine, then awesome. And again, if you pivot to getting a Corey Davis and McGovern, then they're better than the 5th round guy would have been most likely anyway. So have conviction there. It's fine. Again, like those picks are probably what, a 15-20% hit rate. Yeah. So if you're not going to reach for a need, then it's fine to me, because realistically, what is the chances that 5th round pick actually fills said depth need for the Jets? Again, whether that be receiver or at offensive lineman. And I know a lot of people will like look at the mock draft simulators and like, oh, I love this guy in the 5th round. He's going to be an absolute stud. It's like, okay, well then why did he fall to the 5th round?
Exactly.
You know, so like, so it's like, oh, we want that 5th round guy to work out and be our receiver 4. Do you really want to trust a 5th round guy to be your receiver 4? You know, like running backs have a historically high hit rate or a higher hit rate than every other position. So if you need a running back 4, running back 3, then I'm fine with doubling up. It's a thing where like it gives you flexibility. Hey, if Izzy doesn't adjust to the scheme well, then he's your running back 4 or he's cut. You know what? Like, so like what happens? Let's say if they were to just if they didn't draft this running back, and again, I'm not trying to be take bullets for Douglas here. It's just a legitimate line of thinking. It's like if Izzy doesn't work out this year, and he's cut, and we didn't have Davis as the second back we drafted, then you just have Allen and Brees, and it's like, oh shit, we need to sign a running back. So we kind of just it's like a safer option. Yeah. I think they're pretty safe. Again, it's something that I did not prefer, but I do think it's a little bit, and I talk a lot about the draft in terms of like mock draft simulators. I'm not saying this is you, I'm just saying in general. Like I think people tend to like go to these mock draft simulators with a grocery list of things they want to check off. Right. And when the team doesn't check off all the things they check off in their 30,000 mock draft simulators, and like, oh, what the hell, they're idiots. But it's like, if you like the player, take the player. Like at that point in the draft, it's such a low hit rate that if you have conviction in a player, whether it be at safety or running back or any one of these other positions that aren't like prime, then I'm okay with it. If he works out, then it's a slam dunk to me. Yes, would I have preferred whoever another receiver, Washington or whatever, who went to the Dolphins? Like, yeah, I would have preferred it, but I actually like Davis individually as a player, so it's not something I'm going to lose my marbles over.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I was like, all right, but like you said, it's the pivot. It's like once the draft was over, I'm like, all right, I still want a receiver, and I still want re-sign McGovern. It's how do you handle after? It's just like real time. It was as it was happening. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like what? Like
yeah.
In your mind, you're like, you have your own vision for the team, and you're kind of seeing how it's playing out, especially with Izzy. Now it's like now. The Jets made a trade of a player during the draft, which I'm still getting criticized for my reaction. I genuinely don't care. Is John Franklin Myers for a 6th round pick in 2026, which I think is absolute ridiculousness. And people are quick telling me, bro, you don't understand. He had bad penalties. Okay. We understand he had bad penalties. Do we also understand he's a quality defensive player? And the Jets run defense, I think it's just the defensive line takes a step back here. And I understand you got Reddick back. I understand everybody's high on Clemens and all these other things. And Kinlaw, bro, you don't understand what Kinlaw is. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But I think you understand what Kinlaw is. So what were your thoughts on the John Franklin Myers trade in terms of, and the salary cap? The salary cap thing, I understand, dude. You have to save money. But you also have a gazillion dollars in dead cap money, too. That was Joe Douglas's fault. But the way they handled the player, the way they handled Huff, it just gives me a weird feeling they could have handled this differently. You could still be here. And I hate the way it's handled. I hate the value that it got back to.
Yeah, and one really quick point about the pivot thing you mentioned before. I just want to throw this in there as well. Like, if let's say if they were to draft that receiver in the 5th round, what if that prohibited them, or that prohibited them to grabbing Corey Davis? Like, hey, you have Washington now, but you lost Davis. So again, it's about how all the dominoes fall and how it fills out. If they don't grab another receiver, then I'm like, hey, that second running back pick, I don't like it because they didn't pivot. They didn't get another receiver. But if that ends up being Corey Davis, and it's like, hey, who cares about that 5th round receiver?
Exactly.
You know, so again, it's all about the pivot. How did they pivot from the 5th round, not grabbing that guy? How did they pivot from the 1st round, not getting that receiver? They pivoted to get that guy in top of the 3rd round. So in terms of JFM, this is something that I get criticized for too. It's because it's like, you don't know what Kinlaw is going to be. It's like, okay, then why even have a discussion? Like, it's just, and I know, Kyle Smith, who I used to co-host with, like, he was always big in terms of like appeal to authority. It's like, okay, let's just appeal to authority and say that everything the Jets do is great. And why even have a podcast? Like, why are we talking about it then? Why don't we just bow down everything the Jets do and not talk about some of the things we disagree with? So with me, the offseason has been great for the Jets, but to me, they've completely mishandled the defensive line. It just is what it is. Like, there is gray area. Like, they've done great in the offensive line, and great in the receiver core. They did great at backup quarterback. Is it unfair for me to criticize what they've done? And again, yes, I do not know what Kinlaw is, but like, why can't we just cut? Can we cut? I don't know. Quinnen Williams now because we don't know what Kinlaw is? Like, is he just suddenly going to be Quinnen Williams now? Like, you don't know. And if you say you do know, then you're lying. Like, can I take that argument back to you in that form? Like, okay, then he's just going to be great. Let's just say he's a Hall of Famer now. You don't know that he's not John Randall. It's like, what are we doing here? So, So again, at the time of the signing of some of those guys, which we'll talk about. I know you asked me about JFM. You sign Kinlaw, and I get that the rebuttal to this is going to be that, hey, at the time of the Kinlaw signing, they didn't think they're going to lose JFM because Reddick wasn't available. Okay, I get that. But at the end of the day, just looking at the money, you paid Kinlaw what you are gaining with the JFM trading. And to me, again, I'm not going to say that he was 100% going to be, I guess worse than Kinlaw or whatever, but JFM's a better player. Like, can we just admit that? He's a guy who gets 40, 50 pressures a year. I think it was like 40 pressures last year, which is high. He doesn't finish sacks great, but still he gets pressure there. I think he's an average to an above average pass rusher, which is better than Clemens is at this point. So he's a decent pass rusher, and he's an elite edge setter. So he's a good player. Jets fans tend to back the team no matter what. It's like that tribalism shit. It's like now once he leaves the team, he sucks. He's an asshole. It's like, no, he's a good freaking player. I don't like the trading of him for a 6th round pick. Now, is it to make a move? Okay. If it's to make a move, I don't love it. You're getting, he's getting what, 2 years, $15 million from the Broncos. Like, I would do that every day of the week for 100%. JFM. Did I think he was making a lot at 14, 15 million? Yeah, sure. But 7.5, like, we couldn't have figured out a way to not pay Kinlaw or to move some money around and play JFM, because a lot of my thinking with the defensive line this year was like, hey, okay, they might have degressed in terms of the interior, but if their move was to, okay, now Reddick and McDonald and JJ are going to play outside, then okay, naturally, you should probably play JFM on the inside because he's better than the guys on the interior. So play them, and then don't have a 1st round pick in JJ or McDonald or even Reddick sitting on the bench all the time. You have 2 spots for 3 guys there instead of 4 guys for 2 spots. Right. Whereas, if you just kept them outside, then you have Kinlaw playing on the interior and any one of, or any 2 of Reddick, JJ, JFM, and McDonald staying on the bench, which is just not proper like resource allocation to me. Right. So, it's a thing where I was hoping that he's just going to play more inside, and that's kind of the avenue that I saw the defensive line moves making sense this offseason. Now, obviously, they traded him, so that's not their vision. But I don't like getting rid of him. I thought he's a good locker room guy. I thought he's a good player. Again, overall in the defensive line, Woods to Fotu to me is it a downgrade? Again, I'll say it slowly. At the time of the signing. They're not technically worse right now at the time of the signing. Yep. Say it again. Maybe, now if I say it maybe 2 or 3 more times, we'll see. So downgrade there to me. Jefferson to Kinlaw is a downgrade. Yep. And then I like Reddick, but would you take Huff and JFM over Reddick? Like, maybe you would at that point, because it adds just some more versatility. So I think they have downgraded on the defensive line, and somebody said, like, I think it was I don't know who it was, some asshole, like 10,000 followers, 11,000 followers, had a decent following on Twitter, but he's like, the Jets still have a really good defensive line. It's like, yeah, thanks, dude. Like, I know they still have a good defensive line, but can I not criticize the moves they've made? Like, they may have went from 3 to 6 or like 3 to 5. I'm saying that I don't like the moves. I'm not saying, oh, now they're absolutely terrible and they suck. It's like, no, I'm criticizing some of the changes they've made in terms of the player swap outs. So JFM was kind of like the cherry on top of mishandling the defensive line room, in my opinion. You get rid of him, good player. You overpay Kinlaw. In what world does Kinlaw deserve $7.5 million for what he's done? I don't see it. This is his I think his 5th year in the NFL, the first 3 were very disappointing. And then this 4th year was highly volatile and it wasn't even really that great. And he's making double what you paid Jefferson. And on top of that, Jefferson, like you hear, and this is kind of like the Jetsian thing, like we have great offseason, but the Jets couldn't respond to a text from Jefferson in time. Like, what are we sending fucking carrier pigeons? Like how do you not answer your phone? Like you have hundrds of people in there and you can't, hey, just tap Joe Douglas on the shoulder. Hey, he's getting offered this. Should we offer him this? Like, is he locked in a room on on a singular landline? Like, what are we doing here? Like, how do you not respond to Jefferson? Like, it makes no sense to me. This is like one of those Rodgers, FaceTime things in the darkness. So he's talking about like the Packers GM. Like, I don't know what the hell is going on with Douglas and if he was locked away. But yeah, that pissed me off. JFM leaving kind of pissed me off. And then again, the acquisitions I didn't love. I know people are going to be critical of me saying that. No, who cares with the defensive line room? I'm just going to be true to what I see. I think they downgraded there. And I think JFM was kind of the cherry on top of mishandling. And on top of that, really quickly throw it in, another mishandling of the defensive line this year into next year. Or sorry, last year into this year, they restructured Lawson instead of saving money there. And Lawson didn't do shit for the Jets. So they paid him $5 million to do absolutely nothing. And then that $5 million you could have saved, hopefully that could have been the difference in you signing JFM. So you paid Lawson nothing last year, and then you lose JFM for $2 million more than you saved, to rework Lawson. So like, they mishandled it. It just is what it is. Now, with that being said, they've done great everywhere else. I don't want people to try to freaking kill me over that one, but I do think the defensive line was downgraded. It just is what it is.
No, I completely. That's very well said, dude. And I completely agree. And like, I'm with you. Like, I'm not bashing the Jets. I'm not ripping on. I'm saying the defense blows, but in the state that they're in, a win now year, where it's a legit strength of your team, your defensive line, it's now going back a little bit. But you have faith in Ulbrich, you have faith in Saleh. Like, all right, their defensive minds, they've proven they can do things, they can scheme things, and then maybe Saleh gets something out of Kinlaw. But based on what we know, like you said, based on May 5th, this is what we think. But what happens is, like, October 3rd, bro, I told you what was going to happen. This is October 3rd, dude. This is in May. Like, like when you make videos now, it's like, as of this video, as this real-time reaction, but you still, like, listen, I think the Jets defense can still be good, but, if you're being fair, while everybody can praise Joe Douglas, the dead cap money this year is ridiculous because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You keep robbing, and sooner or later, you got to pay the price for it. They're paying it this year. Next year, they're going to have a lot more flexibility, but you want the best you could possibly have now. All right. Maybe not have that, but there's other things you can do to get around it. But overall, if you look at this roster, just again, May 5th, do you think the Jets, I think they're much improved. We can agree on that. We've talked about it for an hour now. Do you think they have the best roster in the AFC East?
Yeah, I do. The Dolphins won a game. It was like they haven't won a game under 45-degree weather. I don't think they beat a winning team last year, so they're kind of like paper tigers a little bit. I think it's part of my like thinking of the Jets offseason. It's like that teams build their teams for their divisions. Like it's undoubtable. If you look at NFL history, they definitely build their team to compete in the division. And in terms of the Dolphins, like, is there any better way to play the Dolphins than just to pound the rock down their throats and take their guys off the field? So I think that's kind of the Jets' vision, is to attack the Dolphins and just keep their guys off the field. Run the ball, take a 10-minute drive and keep Hill, keep him cold on the bench. So I do think they have the best roster. Again, there is nuance to conversations. I do think they downgrade on the defensive line. Now, with it being said, I also think the defensive line will probably produce more because they're not going to be scoring 3 points in a game because you have Tim Boyle at quarterback. So with that being said, I think they might outproduce last year's defensive line while also acknowledging that I think the individual talent level has decreased. So again, there's nuance. People don't want to have nuance. Yep. So yeah, I think they'll be fine. I'm a little bit worried in the run game, the defensive line. Kinlaw is highly volatile. Thomas was better last year, still volatile. Q is obviously great, but he's the only guy in the interior who's great there. And then like in terms of like, Clemens going to take that next step. Like, Clemens was not great last year. And like, to me, like, people love the tough guy stuff. I hate it. I do. Like, dude, you're playing against a bunch of other 300-pound men. Like, is anybody afraid of you walking in shirtless with a bat? Like, nobody gives a fuck in the NFL level. Like, I'm sorry. If anything, it's cheesy, man. Like, I don't know how you feel about that, but I don't think anybody in the NFL is scared of Clemens because he walks in with a Lucy bat. Like, if anything, it's kind of stupid. I think he talks a little bit too much for what he actually is. It's like produce and be a decent role player before we start yapping a little bit. Fighting with Dawkins, all this stuff in the lock in the tunnels and stuff. So I'm a little bit over Clemens. And that's another just kind of throwing some more nuance into the defensive line conversation. Just throwing another thing into there. Like, I think that's another way they mishandled it. To me, Clemens is a guy who, if he's going to be, like, just let him be what he is. Let him be a mauler as a defensive end, taking on tight ends, taking on tackles with his power. But adding weight to him to move him to the inside made, and I said this before it happened, it made zero sense to me because like with JFM, at least if you put JFM inside, he's more athletic than the guard. So you're using his athleticism against those guys in the interior. Great. But with Clemens, like he doesn't offer you athleticism on the inside. So you're taking his strength, which is his strength on the edge, and almost like for lack of a better term, like decreasing on the inside. It's like, hey, he's strong on the outside. He's not strong on the inside. So you're kind of miscasting him. So they miscast him a little bit last year. And in terms of that. But in terms of the roster overall, I think it's the best in the AFC East, right? Like we have a top 3, top 5 defense. The skill group is absolutely stacked. I still think they added McGovern. I still think they added MVS or something like that. Receiver group is solid. Your targets 1 through 5 in terms of like Conklin, Brees, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, and then Corley, and hopefully another guy. Like it's a very good group. You have a quarterback who should be at least like top 10, which is huge for the Jets. Like realistically last year, and I'm not trying to like go back in history here, but if we had Tyrod starting last year, we're probably a 10-win team. Like legitimately, like 100%. Do you lose that first Pats game? You don't. Do you lose that Falcons game? You don't. Do you lose that Raiders game? You probably don't. So think they could have been a 10-win team with Tyrod last year. You look at the schedule this year. I'm not trying to go through it like win by win, and you never know what's going to happen necessarily. But I think it's like the 4th or 5th easiest schedule in the NFL. So I'm expecting nothing less than like an 11, 12-win team this year. I think anything other than that is disappointing. Like people say 10 wins, like that's bullshit, dude. Like we could have won 10 wins last year with, in my opinion, a harder schedule and a worse roster. So like, why are we settling for 10? Give me 11, give me 12, give me 13 wins. I think that's what you should expect from the Jets.
Yeah, 100%, dude. To me, we've talked about this. I'm like playoffs, make a legitimate run to the AFC East. Anything less than that is unacceptable. 11 wins, 10 wins, and it's got to be like, you got to whoop some ass this year. Like, put up points. Like, there's no more excuses. You got a backup quarterback. You got better depth. You got better talent. You literally have run out of excuses for this team. Like, no more for Salah and all these guys, to be honest with you, especially with Aaron Rodgers and his mind, with bringing it to the offense and the leadership. Like, there's a lot of things you can question last year. A lot that should go away this year. So, do you think, like, how would you assess, like, this is your last question, by the way, because I know it's late and you're
I'm good to roll, but it's okay, whatever. If it's the last one, it's the last one. I'm cool with that.
So, but what is your assessment of Joe Douglas now? Because now it's like, this was an enormous offseason for him, and I was critical as shit of him last year, but it's like, all right, he went through free agency, he went through the draft, he's probably make a couple more moves, but how would you assess his offseason? He's gone, Rex Hogan's gone, Alexander's gone, so now this is really on him now. Is it a save his job kind of offseason, do you think? Or how do you think he did so far?
Yeah, I think it's a good offseason. I'm still not sure if, like, to me, they're kind of attached at the hip with Rodgers. Like, I don't really see a situation where Rodgers is here and then they get a new GM and a new head coach for 1 year of Rodgers. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think they do just ride it out. Like, if it goes down this year, then either everybody's gone, including Rodgers, or if, like, let's say they get into the wild card divisional, they get eliminated. I don't think it's a thing where, like, hey, we're gonna again bring in a new GM, new coach for 1 year of Rodgers. I just don't see that being like an appealing situation for a lot of GMs and head coaches necessarily. So I think they're all kind of tied at the hip together. So in terms of like what he's done so far, again, I like it. I like the offensive line. I like what he did at receiver. I like what he's done overall in the entire roster for the most part. But again, there's nuance. Like I think in the draft in general, he's probably better. He's a better drafter than some realize. Like even if you go back and you look at like Ozzie Newsome, like go back and look at Ozzie Newsome's hits in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds. It's like we're so like prone to talk about how bad the Jets are in those rounds without acknowledging that other teams miss a shit ton there as well. Like Joe Douglas has a pretty good hit rate in the NFL draft. Like it's not just 2022 obviously was great, but like Michael Carter, the second, Eccles, Hall, some of the UDFAs he's picked up after the draft. Like he has a good eye for talent in terms of like the guys in the waiver wire, Quincy, JFM, which obviously they didn't re-sign him, which is a mistake. But so there's a lot of good with him. Picking up guys, trades for the most part. He's been good minus the JFM one. But he typically fleeces people. So that there's a lot of good there. The downside of him is, and it's kind of one of the reasons we have all this dead money, is his free agent signings have been garbage up to this point. Now this year they've been good, but like And again, sometimes it's a good thing you recorded, sometimes it's not a good thing you recorded. But in this instance, it is good because like they signed Blake and Tomlinson. I'm like, dude, $17 million for this guy. Like he's okay. Like he's maybe above average, but like they overpaid him from the jump. Again, I in what world does a Uzama get money over or get more money than Conklin? I legitimately have no idea how that happened. Like watching both their film, like how is he paid more than this guy? So you have that one. You have Dalvin Cook last year, which we said we were shouting from the rooftops. Do not do that. They did it for whatever ungodly reason, probably Rodgers. But so he's been pretty bad in free agency. You're hoping that pivots this year with some of the signings he's made, even though admittedly they're pretty volatile, right? Like Tyron Smith has some injury problems. Morgan Moses had an injury last year. Mike Williams had an injury. Kinlaw, highly volatile player. So they can go either way this year, even though I do like this offseason more than his past offseasons. So I don't think he's overpaid anybody by a lot, minus overpaying for Kinlaw. But you look at the Tyron Smith and the Mike Williams contract, like there's very little risk there because I think Mike Williams makes, what is it, like $8 million, and there's like $7 million incentives to go up to 15 or whatever it is, something like that. Don't quote me on it, but I know it's up to 15 million. And then Tyron Smith, it's like, hey, again, he's getting paid whatever it is, but it's a lot of incentives in terms of like playing time and playoffs and all of that stuff. So if he comes in and unfortunately gets injured, you're not paying him a lot. So I like a lot of the ways he structured the contracts this offseason. I think he's a solid GM. I just don't think he's done enough necessarily to save his job. Or like, hey, if Rodgers leaves and Salah's fired, does he get to reset and do the whole thing over again? I'm not so sure. While also acknowledging I think he's probably better than anything we've had, but we're also comparing him to let's be honest, complete shit here. So like, yeah, he's going to look great. And I think the draft he's been relatively great. Again, he misses on a 5th round pick and people want to kill him, but it's like everybody misses on 5th round picks. Like those are probably a 10% hit rate, 15-20%. If you get a guy who's a decent role player in the 5th round, that's a hit. And that's why I'm not going to hate on the Davis pick, which I actually like. I like his film quite a bit. We didn't really talk about him, but I like him. He's shifty, he's consistent, just a very solid player. So I'm definitely I'm in favor of Davis individually as a player. So I like it a little bit more. But yeah, he's been fine. Like it's, I don't know how else to I don't know how to phrase it.
I think the Joe Douglas criticism is going to be Mekhi Becton and Zach Wilson. That's the two big ones where it's like, all right, and that's like, I get it, but he pivoted, which like we keep talking about pivoting. Like, all right, when you make a huge mistake, I mean, last year the way he handled it was fucking horrific, but it's like, but their move was getting Aaron Rodgers. They swung it, they got him. All right, that's your saving grace. Didn't play out last year. This year it has to. So again, nobody's perfect, but I think when you miss monumentally on a quarterback at pick 2, it's like you don't usually get a chance to make up for that mistake. And then with Becton too, it's like, Jesus Christ, that's 2 in a row. But you also then you say, okay, and you can bounce back with Breece, Garrett, Jermaine Johnson, Sauce. Well, all right, it's you have the good and the bad.
That's part of the nuance of the discussion last year, because like I think the easy thing is to say, oh, you can't predict injuries. It's like, hey, like you can, considering that Becton's been injured for 3 years and Dwayne Brown is 38 years old and been injured, and your answer to the offensive line last year with 2 injured guys was to throw a 4th round injured and raw rookie into the mix. Like that was the answer for Aaron Rodgers. Like, what are we doing here? So Douglas has had he's had great moves, and he's also had massive hiccups in terms of, again, Dalvin Cook and signing Uzama and signing Whitehead and doubling down on Whitehead last year. And I think he gave up like 7 or 8 touchdowns last year. Like he was god awful. He was bad in Tampa. He was bad the first year here. Why do we keep him? I don't get it. That was another one. I watched him, and the first thing I heard about Whitehead was he never misses tackles enticed. I'm not even kidding. The first game I threw on, it was them versus the Falcons in like 2019. He missed like 3 tackles right away on Cordell Patterson. Like, what? Why do I even listen to anybody? Like, what is the point of this? It's like he missed tackles immediately. So, yeah, it's just so that's part of the nuance of last year as well. The first year, and we talked about this on the last stream, but rookie OC, rookie head coach, rookie quarterback, no backup there last year with the tackles. So he's had some fatal flaws while also having some really good hits as well. And obviously the offseason, it's incomplete now. There are some moves they don't make. I will criticize them for. Again, I don't think Wes Schweitzer being your only interior to your backup offensive linemen is enough right now. So how do they pivot there? If it's Xavier Newman, I'm going to be pissed. Like, he didn't show a lot last year. Give me back Herbig, who's a good fit for power scheme, counter scheme. McGovern's not the best fit for it, but for $2 million, you could do much worse for Connor McGovern. Do they add to the safety room? To me, that I think that's something they should consider right now, especially considering, the fact that it's a very buyer-friendly market at this point. So, yeah, maybe they don't splurge there, but can you get a solid veteran like Quandre Diggs for $3 million? Like, do it, What do they do at receiver? So he still has some questions to answer this offseason, but overall, I think that we're in a spot where we're legitimately probably a top 3 team in the AFC, and we can compete for a Super Bowl. So he hasn't done a terrible job, right?
Yep. No, and the other thing too is, and that's the other part of the whole JFM thing, where you're saving this cap money. Okay, well, show me where that money is going then. I hate the move, but like, it's about cap space. Okay, if you pivot and go say you get MVS and whoever, a safety or whatever else. All right, I can see. Then you translated that money. We don't like how you did it, but you've added 2 pieces to the puzzle. Okay, I can deal. Or it's McGovern money or whatever else. So it's all like, there's all like moving chess pieces here, right? So I agree, but it's definitely, I'm excited, man. Like, last year, I was hated this team. I hated football. I hated life. I hated everything. And then slowly but surely, you find yourself buying back in because we're Jet fans and we're insane. So you have no choice but to buy back. But you can literally say, like we get asked all the time, like, oh, are they the best team in the AFC East? I'm like, that's still the Bills. But the Jets have a lot of talent now. And I respect Josh Allen. I respect the Bills and everybody else. But they should be able to compete with anybody every week, and they must win football games. And I expect it. I legitimately say they better win 10, 11 games. They have to.
Yeah.
Anything less than that, it's like you said before, what are we doing? Like, it's just not good enough anymore.
You won 7 games back-to-back with Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, all these scrubs, Trevor Siemian at quarterback. If you can't win with 10 with Rodgers and the upgrades they made this year, like, what are we doing? And again, 10 is a low bar to me. Like, win 11. Like half of the conference. Is 7 teams, 7 out of 16 make it, right? Like, you can't be a top third of the. It's not the biggest ask in the world to make the playoffs. Once every 15 years. So they better they better do it. And then part of the Joe Douglas thing too, which I didn't even hit on. It's like, the thing with Zach Wilson is like, oh my God, terrible pick. But I think there was some type of poll or whatever between GMs, and I think 23 were polled, and 21 out of 23 had Zach Wilson as a second quarterback. So was it really that bad of a pick? Now, we could talk about and we can criticize how they surrounded Zach Wilson with the coaching staff, the players, whatever it may be, but individually as a prospect, he was most people's quarterback too. And obviously COVID year really, really hampered teams in terms of, evaluating these guys. Like, and again, I talk about the mental part of the game a lot in terms of how do these guys transition. There's no way to know, especially us sitting on our couches, how this kid from BYU playing in front of nobody is going to transition to playing in front of 100,000 raging hammered Jets fans at MetLife. Like, there's no way to tell exactly how that's going to happen. And clearly he didn't handle it well because he has all of the upside. And you could see it coming from BYU. He had plenty of plays where there was no accuracy problems at BYU. That's what I'll say. He comes into the NFL and he's skipping 5-yard outs. And it's like, what is happening here? But again, that's the mental part of the game that we can really never account for sitting on our couch. So in terms of criticizing Douglas for the Zach Wilson pick, I kind of think it's bullshit. I do, just in terms of the individual pick.
But hold on. But maybe the pick I won't criticize him for. I'll give him that. Because the class has been a bomb altogether. So it's like, all right, minus Trevor Lawrence. But I think as an organization, the way they handled him on and off the field throughout his career here, I think was horrific on so many different levels. And I'm not saying Zach is great. I think Zach did his own part of fucking things up too, but the Jets as an organization, and dude, last year's the perfect example of it with Zach and the way he handled it. He shouldn't have been playing. He shouldn't have been here, first of all. He shouldn't have been here, but he shouldn't have been the spot to be a backup either. I think that's where Douglas, whether that was Saleh pushing it, Woody Johnson pushing it, I have no idea, but the way they handled him, dude, I thought was awful. Absolutely awful.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of what I said. There's nuance. In terms of the individual pick, don't think you can criticize it. In terms of, again, rookie year, rookie OC, rookie head coach, tight ends, all of that stuff, offensive coordinator who's 32 years old and all of that, you could definitely criticize that 100%. And then this year, the amount of times they stuck their foot in their mouth, we wanted to redshirt him. No, you didn't. You can't have a redshirt year for a backup quarterback with an older 40-year-old quarterback. It makes no sense. So I'll undoubtedly criticize them for how they handled the Wilson. Again, but in terms of the individual pick, I don't think you can criticize it. I think it's a fine pick. Now, So yeah, with that you can definitely criticize how they handled it. I don't think it was as bad as Darnold. Like Darnold was throwing to Andre Roberts and playing behind who was that right tackle we had for Connor McDermott, who's an absolute turnstile, Greg Van Roten, like all these people. Like he had it a little bit worse than like Sam did. Sam legitimately had probably the worst receiver core. And this is not, I'm not even trying to be dramatic here. Like legitimately the worst receiver core with the worst offensive line with the worst head coach. There's not a worst case scenario for a quarterback to go into. So I'm not going to say it was that bad, but I also acknowledge that yes, redshirting him obviously was apparently redshirting him. And the fact they didn't do that was a mistake last year. What they surrounded him with in terms of the brain trust and the guys he can rely on for help and nuance and all that stuff in year one was a mistake. Again, last year. So yeah, there's definitely nuance to it. And they were partial in ruining him, but I don't think it's a thing where it was just Zach. It was just the Jets. It was just Hackett. It was kind of a combination of crap thrown together. So I blame everybody for the Zach situation. But again, in terms of the actual pick, I think it was 21 out of 23 GMs. If maybe I'm misquoting that, but 21 out of 23. So they would have taken Zach over Justin Fields or anybody else in that draft. And that whole draft has sucked. Like Zach Wilson sucks. Nobody talks about Trey Lance because of how the Niners have pivoted. They played him like 3-4 games and got rid of him for absolutely nothing, whatever that was. Mac Jones is now a backup. Justin Fields is now a backup, and even Trevor Lawrence, like everybody's like golden boy generational guy, like he's kind of just average with the Jags right now. Like some people have questions about his future now, and like there was questions about if they're even going to pick up his 5th-year option, which obviously are going to as a quarterback, but like he hasn't even been a disappointment. So I think that was a little bit of like a year with an asterisk next to it, because I don't think they could have done, or it's seeming that they didn't do enough of evaluation, like deep diving into these prospects because of COVID and whatever restrictions they had on it. So yeah, I won't criticize the pick. I'll criticize for how they surround him, undoubtedly.
Well, you just dropped an hour and 20 minutes of pure knowledge. I mean, the best thing about talking to you is I walk away always feeling smarter. I do. I always feel smart. I'm like, fuck, I learned something tonight. Like I'm like, and then when I do, like everybody else, I'm gonna take all the shit you said, I'm gonna regurgitate it everywhere. I'm like, oh, my analysis, this is what I thought. Like I just think this is my hour of watching tape just now. I just now watch tape for an hour. I learned something. Yeah, and we didn't even hit Davis and Key and all those guys. So maybe next time. No, so yeah, we didn't really study Key, but the other one interesting guy was the guy the guy from Canada, which dude, I had no idea. I was like, like towards the later part of the draft, I'm like, I like it, but I'm like, I don't know these guys. Like I'll go watch them. But the kid from Canada, the story is wild, dude, and like his work ethic and what he's been through and his adversity and his obviously he's got talent. Did you peek at his film at all?
Yeah. So I'll hit on those guys quickly just so we can really wrap it up. So with him, obviously you love the story, and it seems like they're saying like they're betting on more of his mindset and his athleticism than his actual football play. They think his mindset's so elite that he cannot fail. And okay, like I'll take, like that, what that's saying is it's like that, I forget the exact quote of it, but it's like, you'll take average talent with hard work ethic than a guy with, elite talent and no work ethic type of deal. So they're kind of banking on that. But with that being said, with Stiggers, he has really good, like he has good speed, good fluidity, good acceleration, good like aggressive mindset. I never thought I'd be watching CFL film, but somehow it's legitimately a black market. Like somebody asked me on Twitter the other day, like, oh, how'd you get this film? And I think I responded. I just said a wizard, because I'm not giving you my guy. Like it's just a black market. But yeah, I got Toronto Argonaut film, and some of it was the most brutal angles. But yeah, I got 4 or 5 games into him. I like him a lot of upside, good mentality. He played like more like cover 3, cover 4 type of looks. Really good at staying over top of guys. Again, really fluid, good mindset. So I like him in terms of upside. The Davis pick really quickly, like him. And this is a bad comparison because he's not exactly this player. It's just because of relevance and people know who this player is. But he's almost like remember how like Bilal Powell was like really consistent. We get you 4 or 5 yards every time, churning, good in pass protection, that type of deal. He's like that, but with more power. Like he's powerful, really good stiff arm, really good reads, really good at setting up his blocks, really good vision, in my opinion. But he's a little bit limited athletically. He's not a guy who is going to take the top off the defense or burn guys or anything like that. Not elite explosion, but in terms of like just getting 4 or 5 yards consistently, he's one of those guys. And like people look at the speed, like 4.6 speed, whatever that is. Like, yeah, do you want Chris Johnson? Do you want 4.2 speed at running back? Sure, but I think speed is is like very overrated for running backs. Like how often are guys running full bore? It's more about like short area quickness and burst and reads and setting up blocks and pressing the B gap to get into the A gap and having high knees in traffic to avoid trash. Like there's so many little technical things with running backs that I think he does well. So he's a guy who is less volatile than Allen, but more consistent. But Allen's going to get you that again, 150, where a guy like Davis to me is going to get you 5'5", 10, so he's more consistent to me in terms of his like technique and vision. So I actually really like the pick. Again, Stiggers, elite mindset, really good in terms of, again, fluidity, movement skills, aggression, all that stuff. And then Key, like Mr. Irrelevant, what it is, 257. I've only watched 2 games of him. And the thing I could say about him is really not much. He's like perfectly just like average. Like there was nothing that stood out to him. Like there's nothing. Like he didn't do, like, I'm still waiting for something to stand out because like typically you'll have like one trait for a guy. To me, he just like everything was just like okay. That the only thing in terms of upside that I see with Key is, hey, I forget what school he went to the prior year, but he transitioned from a lesser school to Bama. Okay, which like, I get, like, and this is one of the reasons I love Corley. Like apparently he had a chance to make like $300,000 extra with the transfer portal, and he was loyal, which hopefully he's loyal with the Jets as well and gives us a nice hometown discount in 3 years. But with Key, you have a guy who transitions from a smaller school to Bama, and then he said it in his interview. He at first was 3rd string, and then 2nd string, and then 1st string. And Saban and his defense asks a lot of the corners because of the way they pass off routes and stuff. It's super super intricate. So the fact that he went from not knowing the system to knowing the system, at least, he has elite understanding of like football and retainability in terms of that. So maybe they saw a smart player and they're going to bank on him being a smart guy who's going to be in the right place, right time. He's not a good athlete. He's not the best athlete in the world, more of a box guy. But I can see the interest there because of how, again, the mindset. So I like Davis, I like Stiggers, and again, Key is just a guy, 257. So I'm not going to go crazy about it, but I like the way they ended the draft as well. So I don't want people, waiting for the opinions of those guys as well. And it's funny too, because like you're talking about like the hour and stuff, and people get mad at me, dude. Like I'm busy, and like Buffalo Jets fans out there, and he put out a tweet like, I don't know if you saw the meme that he put out, but he's like basically like waiting for my opinions or whatever it is, so I can like regurgitate them. I'm like, can you give me like a couple of minutes here? So you could blame Tyson right now that I'm not watching a Braelon Allen film, because you're delaying me right now. I'm waiting to get to that, I don't know, 26th game of Allen I've watched. So.
But the cool thing about Joe Douglas, the exact kind of player he wants. You want these guys that love the game of football. They're physical, they're work ethic, they're good locker room guys, they're tenacious. That's the one thing that keeps translating. Every prospect seems like he drafts is that kind of player. Like you talk about all that work ethic, yards after the catch, physical, like all these things. That's all a good thing. That's good for a locker room. That's good for actually building a program in theory where that sets your tone, it sets your standard. Unfortunately, it hasn't been translating to wins, but that's what you want, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is a part of football that, again, we don't really know about. And that's like one of the reasons, like, I didn't want to bring in Odell. Like, I don't want the guys who are highly volatile. Garrett Wilson, like, we love Garrett Wilson. You've seen some sparks of Garrett Wilson. Like, he's not getting the ball and stuff. He's getting mad. Like, Garrett Wilson's a guy, like, I saw the other day, like, saying he wants to be a Jet for life is great. Like, to me, and I said it before, and people have quoted, it's like, he is everything that Jamal Adams pretended to be.
100%.
Sauce. Like I love that guy. Like, he needs to be a Jet for the rest of his career. He does. Garrett Wilson, though, like, he's a little bit more volatile. I love his mindset, but you can see he gets frustrated and stuff. So I could see if the Jets don't work out the next couple of years, I could see Garrett Wilson going to the Texans and linking up with his buddy. So that makes me like a little bit nervous. But in terms of like overall, the mindset, like Garrett Wilson, elite mindset, Sauce, elite mindset, JJ, elite mindset, like everybody they bring in for the most part has elite mindsets. And the guys they haven't are the guys who have not worked out, like Denzel Mims. Listen, like, again, the salmon thing, that's an excuse to me, like soft in my opinion. Yeah. He's seen, and again, this is me, 180 pounds sitting in my downstairs calling Denzel Mims, who's 215 and a behemoth, soft, but it's all relative, right? At the NFL, he at least mentally, he seemed a little bit soft. Elijah Moore, dude, like, I don't know what it is. And like, people get mad at me when I say this, but it's just the facts. Like, I'm not going to hold back my opinion. Like, as soon as I get a receiver and that receiver starts tweeting out scripture, I'm like, like here it goes. The scripture guys. And he started doing it. I'm like, like this is not great. And then, obviously he didn't work out. Michael Carter seemed to not have the best mindset. Like, he seemed like a funny guy, but a little bit volatile in terms of some of his comments. And like, again, hasn't earned his keep in the NFL level. They bring in, I think they brought in, who are they bringing that one? James Robinson after Brees went down, and like, he's tweeting out stuff, whatever. It's like, who are you to criticize the Jets not picking up running backs, whatever. So, but I think they've, minus those guys, they've had a lot of elite mindset type of guys, and I think that is part of a championship, type of culture. How much does that matter? It's hard to quantify, but I do think it matters at least enough that it does matter, like, without better phrasing.
Well, I think it definitely matters because you have such a young locker room that's learning. They're trying to find their way in the NFL. You're setting your standards, and it's like raising everybody's level. Like, when you have Jermaine Johnson working his ass off, Will McDonald's going to follow him. Like, when Sauce is the technician, all these young corners are going to follow him. Like, you have like CJ Mosley, like Quinnen Williams. Like, they have all these great players. And now Aaron Rodgers, like, run your fucking routes, dude. This is the way we work here. But that's what you need. Because for so long, the Jets are like a rudderless ship with they have no direction, no leadership, no accountability. Now you're starting to get that. Now the final piece is win football games. And they got to learn how to do that. They haven't done that yet, but that's where all this has to translate to, where you're winning your 11, 12 games, making the playoffs, win the AFC East and everything else. That's the final piece. But yeah, I'm excited, man. I appreciate your time. And dude, it's like, I literally enjoy talking to you because I feel like I get smarter. Some people we talk to, I'm like, all right, like, I know this shit. I'm dangerous now, but you're literally, dude, the commitment you make to what you do is amazing. Everybody knows you. But seriously, like, your effort, your time, and like, your commitment to yourself. You're like, listen, like, because what you do is tough, dude. Because you put your takes out there, and everybody wants to analyze it and find. They want you to be wrong. That's what they want. Like, oh no, you're wrong. Because when you're right, you get no credit. When you're wrong, everybody talks about it, right? That's kind of how it works. And I give you so much credit, dude, because it's like, and the best thing is you're a Jet fan too. So it's not like sometimes analysts will give you a take on a player, but they don't give a fuck about your team. So you're actually a legitimate diehard fan. So you want them to be good. You want the team to win, but you're also going to say, listen, this is why I have concerns, which makes it even more fun.
Just put in enough work where you're not wrong, Tyson. That's my motto. So hopefully we hit, the Evan Neal thing hit, the Burks thing hit. So no, I've been wrong about players undoubtedly as well. You're not going to be 100%, but like I said, I like pouring a lot. Like, if I'm going to talk about something, I don't like to be misinformed, So I'm not gonna be like, hey, I really like this 4th round pick. And then, like, again, 5 minutes of research, YouTube highlights. Like, it's really stupid to me. So yeah, I put in a lot of work to know these guys and to study the game and all of that. So I appreciate it for sure. And again, hopefully, hey, we've had like 2.5 hours the last week or so. So I'm always willing for more shows. Again, the last time it was like this is fun. Is a 2-year gap, so hopefully that does not happen again. Again, still waiting for. It's still lost. That pigeon's out there somewhere, flapping around. It's still trying to find my way here.
I never heard it yet.
But no. Until next time, I definitely hope there's another invite. I definitely enjoy chopping up on the channel, and that's and this is not like the us brown nosing event here, but like, I appreciate that at least with this show, you're willing to say, I don't fucking know. Like, that's completely fine. Just say you don't know, and like that was part of my problem. It's like, hey, I'm listening to ESPN Radio or WFAN. I'm listening to these people talk about football, and they couldn't identify a coverage. They don't know what technique is. So why the fuck do I give it? Why do I care about your opinion? Like, I'm not gonna be like, oh, this guy's so much smarter than me because he's on ESPN. So as long as people are upfront about what they do or do not know, I'm completely respectful. But it's my problem comes when people are kind of like falling, are flying like a false flag out there. Like, hey, I know more than I do, or trying to be pretenders. And that's one of the most frustrating things to me on Twitter. I'm not saying I'm anybody or anything like that. I'm nobody. I don't know shit compared to like the real guys out there. Bill Belichick. I'm nobody. But what pisses me off on Twitter is the people who try to put stuff out there and like be something they're not. And I'm sitting there, I'm reading, I'm like, bro, like I wish I could just say something right now. I'm just not going to do it because I'd be that asshole. But we could talk about that stuff in private, Tyson. I'll never talk about that in front of the 200 people, but I trust you enough that we can have those conversations in private now. You're in my circle now, so that's for post show.
No, I appreciate it. It's tough, man. Like, social media is tough, especially what you do with film study and evaluating players. It's never easy, but I definitely appreciate it. Now, just the last thing. Obviously, where can everybody find you? They know, but give out where everybody finds you, because you're a man on every show right now. But how can they find you?
Yeah, we could start a Patreon for like after dark conversations, shitting on other social media guys. So people will sign up for it. We can have some discussions because Jets Twitter is a wild world. You have a lot of variety of people out there. It's quite wild. But yeah, Jorby31 on Twitter. Blewett Splits on YouTube. They do a live stream. They bounce around a little bit because I'm going to 4 to 12 now, since there's not like a settled day, but just turn the notifications on. And then obviously JetsXFactor. The reviews, sometimes they're free, sometimes they're not. Usually you get like 15 to 20 minutes of them. They're long and drawn out 100%. It's definitely a niche thing. I understand that. But if you are one of those guys like, hey, instead of kind of just like talking, like to me, like, hey, if you're going to talk about Olu Fashanu for the next 3 months, like, why not watch an hour and a half of him and try to really understand what he is? Like, so to me, it's worth it. Again, it's a niche thing. Some people don't give a shit. Just perform on the field, and it is what it is. Again, I like to know those reviews are out there. I plan on eventually making like little shorter videos, 6, 7, 8 minute ones, because those are the ones that there's not a lot of people who want to watch a 2-hour video. So I do plan on eventually getting some type of person who's going to basically take my videos, cut it up to I could put out like 3 strengths, 3 weaknesses, fancy graphics, fancy highlights. Those things hit. Brett Coleman is a guy who people respect. He's a smart football guy, but he also has great graphics. Like I think that's the next step. Things I do. So I do plan on doing that eventually. But for right now, it's the niche 2-hour film breakdowns. But even if you don't want to go and watch those, I do live streams where I show some plays, and even if actually see the plays I'm talking about, at least if you kind of familiarize yourself with my reviews, you at least know that what I'm talking about, even if I'm wrong, I at least have conviction in, and I've actually watched the player, and I have like strong opinions. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could be wrong, that's fine, but at least I do enough research to actually talk about the guy. So.
Well, Joe, thank you once again. I'm sure everybody's already following you. If they don't, they better, because what the hell are you doing otherwise? And then we will definitely keep in touch, man. The cool thing is that we're getting to like the slow part of the off season. I can like kind of like digest and sleep and like enjoy life a little bit. Summertime, then training camp starts and the sleep goes away again. But at least it's a fun time to but I definitely appreciate your time, man. I know you're busy as shit.
We cannot be more polar opposites. Right, like right now is the relaxed time for you. For right now, like I think I have like 37 reviews. I got 30 more to do. In terms of recording, another 7-8 players dumped on my plate. So this is the busiest time of the year for me. Like from January to about June is just a madness. But yeah, no. Hopefully again soon. Hopefully before the summer is up. And if not, then I am planning on seeing you week 1. So
1000%. Joe, thank you. Make sure you guys follow. Thank you guys for all watching too. I know it's like a random Sunday night. We're doing this, and we will talk to all you guys later on. Have a good night.